on to planking. Now, in an earlier lesson, we covered the basics of the planking, and I'm going to revisit that, and then I'm going to show you some more advanced versions of planks that you might like to consider. So the first one is really just a standard plank. Now, if you remember from the discussion we had in an earlier lesson, I said that planking by itself without any control over your pelvis is really just a hip flexor exercise. So the first part to make a plank more effective is to purely think about doing a posterior pelvic tilt. So from my position here, I'm going to squeeze my glutes, I'm going to contract my abs, and I'm going to try and rotate and squeeze my bum under as hard as I possibly can. That in itself is extremely effective for switching the hip flexors off and really switching the glutes and the core on. Now, a variation of that is what I then call the active plank. And so we're going to come into this position here. I'm going to squeeze my glutes and squeeze my abs, and then I'm going to pull back with my elbows. I don't let my elbows move, but just the process of trying to pull my elbows to my toes whilst I'm squeezing my glutes and my abs really switches on your core in a really high way. And as I mentioned previously, it's really just impossible to do that exercise for more than just a few seconds before fatigue sets in really quickly, which is what you want. You don't want to be doing planking for minutes on end because it's just a waste of time. Okay, so some more advanced versions of plank. So apart from our standard plank, we can now start to move our legs and arms around a little bit, trying to maintain a solid plank position. So again, just as a refresher, a plank position is largely a position like as if you're standing with good posture, but you're in a horizontal position. And so what's great is that by getting your core strong enough to be able to move arms and legs around in a plank position means that when you actually do stand up vertically, you're going to be in a much stronger position when you do whatever activities that you want to do. So there are three versions of this that I'd like to kind of show you that are quite challenging from the standard plank position. So the first one's going to be, you're going to get into a plank position, you're going to think about squeezing your glutes under, keeping nice and controlled and still. And what I'm going to then do is not letting my hips move, and that's the key to the exercise. I'm going to try and lift one leg off the ground and hold it off the ground for a couple of seconds and then lower it back down to the floor. Reset. Squeeze your bum, contract your abs, lift the other leg off the ground, hold off the ground for a couple of seconds, lower it back down and relax. That becomes extremely challenging. The most important thing is that you don't allow your hips to move to the side. So I'm going to show you a short clip now showing you sort of a different view and how sometimes your hips can move to the side. Now what you'll often see when you start doing planking and start moving your arms and legs around is that you're just unable to keep your pelvis stable. That's probably the key to the exercise, is keeping it stable. So I'm going to give you a demonstration of doing just a one-legged lift plank and showing you good technique where the hip doesn't move and then what you typically see. So to start with, I'm going to get myself into a plank position here. I'm going to be really strong, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my leg up and I'm going to lower it back down, and hopefully my hip is not moving at all whilst I'm doing the exercise. Now, if you're not particularly good through your core, you don't know how to control sort of your pelvic stability, what will happen is you lift your leg, you'll see things will kind of drop to the side. So you lift and things will drop just to try and change your center of gravity to handle a particular load. So again, strong through your core, you've got to really activate your core super strong to be able to lift your leg and not have your hip flexors do any of the work and have your pelvis start moving all over the place. Again, you've got to be really focused on holding the core really strongly when you do that exercise. So a further advancement on the leg raising plank is to try and do an alternating leg and arm raise. And again, this is extremely challenging. Most importantly, that you can't let your pelvis move to the side. As per the previous clip, which you saw when I was doing one-legged planking and I was being a little lazy through my core was moving, or my torso was moving from side to side as I was doing the leg movement. This is even further exacerbated with this exercise, and so it's absolutely vital that you keep your core absolutely stationary when you're doing the exercise. And I would suggest that with some help is get a family member or a friend to stand over you and put their hands on either side of your pelvis when you're about to do this exercise, because sometimes people just aren't aware that their pelvis is moving and don't allow your pelvis to move. As soon as you do this, in most cases, this exercise is almost impossible to do. So it is quite an advanced exercise. Let me demonstrate. So my position is, I'm in my plank position. Now what I'm going to try and do is being really strong through my core. I'm going to try and lift an arm and an opposite leg and hold them in the air for a second and then lower them back down. An arm and opposite leg and lower them back down. Now, as I mentioned, that's really hard. So you might find it's not possible to do the arm and the leg at the same time. You might be able to lift the leg up and then pop your arm up for a second or less and then drop it back down again. That's totally fine. But I just kind of want to show you a more advanced version of some of these planking that you can do that really challenges your core in a fantastic way and just gets you away from plonking down on a plank, hitting a stopwatch and just running for minutes on end. Now, the only last exercise that potentially you might want to do from a sort of standard plank position would be something that's a little more dynamic. Now, again, this starts to want to activate your hip flexors, and so it's super important that you really maintain a high quality of core control and strength while you're doing the exercise. And this is called a plank jack. Again, let me demonstrate. So the start position is exactly the same. I'm in a plank position. What I'm going to do this time is abs really strong. I'm going to just jump out and jump in with my legs. Now, every time my legs hit the ground, there is a force through my pelvis, through this region here, wanting to give way. And so you've got to be really strong through your core every time you hit the ground. Keep the jumps really small. If you feel it all in your lower back, exercises too advanced, hip flexors are taking over, pulling your lower back, causing the pain, this exercise isn't for you at this stage. But it's in a great way of starting to lead into some more dynamic core training, which we're going to do in future courses. Now, we can take the plank a step further now. So rather than being on your elbows, we're going to now modify this. We're going to start doing planking on your hands. So it really looks like a push-up position. So let me show you again. So to start with, we're going to do a standard plank, but this time instead of being on your elbows, you're on your hands. Now this is great because this is a lead-in to learning how to do push-ups very well. So the keys to this position are, see my body's very much in a straight line. I don't have my hands way out in front. I've got my hands underneath my shoulders. I'm abdominally bracing and I'm squeezing my glutes a little bit. So this position alone is fantastic. You don't need to do anything but just hold this position. Is extremely good for developing the core. Now, the variations on that is you can do a leg raise. And again, just like we were doing with the plank on your elbows, when you lift your leg up, what we don't want is we don't want to have some sort of big hip shift when you're lifting your leg up. Then you can do quite a highly advanced exercise, is you can try and do alternating arm and leg planks, which are quite challenging, and then down, opposite arm and leg, hold solid, and then down. And what we do is we add a really high level of coordination and stability required to be able to do that exercise very well. Again, some of these are quite advanced, but I just kind of want to, again, highlight and show you some of the more advanced, very safe exercises you can do that keep the hip flexors away and really start to train the core in a really functional way. Now, the only other two plank, sort of push-up plank exercises that you could consider to add to your routine is, again, a reach for the sky plank and a pike plank. So again, let me demonstrate the two. So a reach for the sky plank really is kind of as it says. So you're going to start in your plank position nice and solid. What I'm going to get you to do then is I want you to slowly rotate your body and I want you to look to the sky and point your hands to the sky and then slowly back down to your start position and then repeat. Slowly reach up, reach for the sky and then slowly back down. Now what's important is that as you come to the side, you don't let your hips drop. That's actually not good. So you're trying to keep a very strong straight line from your head down to your toes. That's an excellent position and an excellent exercise to do. Now a pike plank is one where you come up nice and high and then come on back down to a really strong position. Don't let yourself sag. So you come up really high, then back down to a strong position, up really high, back down to a strong position, and as you're coming back down into that push-up position, you've got to be really strong through your core to not let things get a little lazy. And again, if you feel it in your lower back, it means you're not being solid enough in your core as you're coming down back into that neutral push-up plank position and you're activating your hip flexors.